My name is Stan Slapp. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Slapp, the international consulting company renowned for maximizing commitment in the three groups that decide the success of your business: your employee culture, your manager culture, and your customer culture. Today on the show, we're going to bust the myths of these cultures with a sledgehammer and show you how they can help you not only survive these tough times, but succeed beyond your wildest dreams. So buckle up. We're going off-road.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Consider this. Are you and your team tough enough, resilient enough to deal with tough times? Do you know how to assure extraordinary success amidst today's extraordinary circumstances? Well, stay tuned, because that's what you're going to discover on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I am the Dragonist, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Find out more about me, simply go to dovbaron.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our live 2-hour interactive Dragon Leadership trainings that are now being made available to you. Imagine being in a virtual classroom with me where I personally walk you through the techniques and strategies that are previously only offered to top CEOs, executive teams, high-level entrepreneurs, athletes, and entertainers. Well, now you have that opportunity. Simply go over to dovbaron.com, click on the menu bar, and there you'll see 2-hour live training button. Join us. In fact, you can get access to all our past episodes on subjects like ethical persuasion, becoming a meaning-driven leader, resilient leadership in times of chaos, and so many more. Just go over to dovbaron.com now and secure your seat. Also, remember that you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook and LinkedIn groups by just looking for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, well, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. And as always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. If you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show over time. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. According to SBA.gov, small business makes up 99.7% of U.S. employer firms. 64% of net private sector jobs, that means. Now, 2020 and the pandemic crisis we are facing is a profound threat to lives, of course, but it's also a threat to livelihoods because many of those small companies are dangerously threatened. The crisis has thrown most businesses into a fog. So what is the surest and fastest way through that fog? Where do you as a leader step first? What is the right direction? What is the wrong direction? How can you tell the difference between whether you're headed toward the rocks or safety? How do you stay standing when everyone else seems to be falling around you? Whose guidance will you trust? Well, what if there is a new strategy, actually new strategies, to counter these extraordinary new circumstances? Strategies that are backed with tactical steps to implement them, to measure the metrics of their success. Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going today. We'll find out, because our guest on this episode is Stan Slapp. Now, there are people out there who talk about doing it. There are people who do it. Stan Slapp is certainly somebody who really does it. Stan is a New York Times best-selling author, renowned thought leader on how to achieve maximum commitment from the three groups that are deciding the success of your company, and I'll tell you who they are in a while. He knows that how these cultures really work and how to get them to work for you. You've heard me say many times that soft skills are the new bottom line. Well, Stan Slap takes that up a notch or 10, and he says anyone who considers soft skills as soft skills is clinically insane. It's the stuff of hardcore business results. So, ladies and gentlemen, please slap your hands together and help me welcome the CEO of Slap, the international consulting company that's worked for 24 years in 44 countries, has achieved many billions of dollars of performance improvements for many of the world's most successful and demanding companies. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you New York Times multiple best-selling author of Bury My Heart in Conference Room B, and most recently, Under the Hood, fine-tune your employee culture, Mr. Stan Slap!
We just stop right here. This is beautiful. Great.
Soak it in. Thanks for joining us, Stan. It's great to have you here, mate.
My pleasure.
We always like to start with this question. In this world of influencers and people being called things like thought leaders, I find it kind of irritating personally because oftentimes those people don't have any background that has made an impact. So one of my questions is always this: who is someone that we might not know, someone that, or we might not think of, who's been a major influence on you and on your leadership?
It's probably not the traditional corporate examples, although I've been a lucky puppy there too. Our clients are great, and I've been schooled by a number of them, and I love that. Probably the person who's had the greatest impact on me personally as a mentor, never intended that, which would be my wife. My wife, Diane, is a clinical psychologist. Done a lot of work with very disturbed young children and adults too. Really serious work. And she's not a business person at all. She that's just not her field. Though she appears interested when I talk, which is a beautiful thing. But anyway, I remember one day we were in a store, and the person behind the counter was being such a jerk, like out of his way to be hostile, not just unhelpful, actively hostile. And I was about ready to go over the counter at the guy, and
New York special.
I know I was puffed up like a peacock, and I'm gonna and Diane said, as we were leaving the store, he must be feeling so small to be that angry. And Deb, I got to tell you, it's just like, it just crystallized everything for me. Is that the reason that we're all so crazy is that we're all feeling so diminished? Because I think what has been figured out a long time ago is that if you're going to sell somebody something, you stand to profit from them not having a true sense of self. Because if they don't know what's true for them, everyone else has unusual influence. And those from consumerism to politics, those influences are relentless, and we're all crazy now. And so I think it was just one of those head spinning epiphanies where everything suddenly made sense about where the solution has to be poured.
Yeah, I think that's profound and important. Human beings need significance. And if we don't get it in a positive, healthy, functional manner, we will get it in an unhealthy, dysfunctional manner. And so you can get it from being kind and generous and caring and loving. You can also get it from screaming out and being a douchebag to whoever fronts up in front of you. And if the positive doesn't work, people will use the negative. And that's right. Not because they're horrible people, although they can be perceived that way in that moment. It's because they just want to feel better. Yeah.
Yes. And oddly enough, in many cases, it's better to have somebody feel worse. I mean, if I can make you feel small to sell you something to feel bigger for a little while, that's a success strategy for me. If Absolutely. I can scare the piss out of you and present myself as a safe alternative, I've got your vote. And and again, it's very sophisticated and it's relentless. So yes, waking people up is...
It's interesting because what you just said there, it's very sophisticated and relentless. I think it can be very sophisticated, but it is very basic also, because it goes to that fear driver inside of us, which is such an easy flip switch for 99.9% of people, 99% of the time. And there are many complicated and sophisticated ways to do it, but it's very basic in its element. And you're right, it is relentless. Now, I said in the beginning that you're a New York kid. What were you like as a kid?
I'm not a New York kid. I'm a New York Times.
New York Times. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
what were you like as a kid? I apologize.
Oh my God. I think probably one of the best ways to just two things as a kid that would just describe me. Like any kid, I heard, if you don't eat your vegetables, I mean, there are people starving in China. And I remember
we had Africa.
or in Africa.
How's Africa?
And I remember when I was told that, it was China when I was told they're not starving there as much anymore, but it was China back in the day. And eat your vegetables, there are people starving in China. And my response was, name one. And so that, but I think that the thing that was legend in my family, I was a kid and I had done something, as kids do, some reckless thing. And I remember my mother saying, if everybody jumped off the Empire State Building, would you? And I said, if everybody else jumped off the Empire State Building, I wouldn't have to. And that pretty much shut that up too. So I was that kind of kid. I was an unguided missile.
We have a term for that. It's called smart ass.
yeah, I did. But I have to say, I put the ass in smart ass.
Right.
I think the intelligence took a while.
But I honestly believe this. A friend of mine wrote a book called The Art of Creative Rebellion. This book here, John Couch. And we have talked about that what changes society is that rebellion. And I think that is born in our childhood. It is natural to us, but we lose touch with it. And for those of us who make a difference in the world, we are still rebels. That kid who said name one,
sure,
that's allowed you to tap into your own genius to do what it is you've done so amazingly, hugely successful in the world. And I think if that had got, quote, slapped out of you, I don't know that you'd have what you have today or made the difference you made today.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, it was, I still can't tell how I ended up with that point of view as more of an issue of profit center than parole. It was because it could have easily veered.
Could have been easily the other one.
It didn't, although the day is young.
There's still time.
There's still time.
Back in 2008, I was talking about the crisis earlier, but back in 2008, you and your company helped a lot of other companies survive the global financial crisis. 2020 might be the precursor to another Great Depression, which many people are talking about. By the way, I always hate saying many people because now
yes,
I'm saying many people are saying. But back then, your message was, who cares why things suck? What's important is what we do about it. In a pandemic or even a post-pandemic economy, is that still the philosophy to follow?
Yeah, I think it really is. Of course, the difference, in 2008, you only had to worry about someone touching your investment portfolio. The scale and gravitas and tenure of what we're dealing with now is just unprecedented. And so it's much deeper, but still the issue is still the same. I think it comes down to, if you're going to solve a problem, you gotta solve the problem that really needs to be solved. And so really for any company, it's what is the test you need to pass, which is where this really starts. If your only goal is to survive, well, then you're going to hunker down, stay in your lane, flinch when you should punch, and be obsessed with where you are now. Mm-hmm. If your goal is to succeed, to say, okay, this may be a lunatic proposition given the threat that conditions we're living in now, but we are going to have our best years. And without being predatory, we're not going to
No.
just dismiss our principles and our purpose, then what happens is you are open to thinking differently. You gather community around you. You inspire confidence, and your focus is on where you want to go, not where you are now. So yes, I think it really still, Dove, it doesn't matter what's happened and why things suck. That's what happened. What matters is what happens now. You've been served. Okay. So what do you do about it?
Mm-hmm.
That's where your energy has to go. Yeah.
But again, talking about what we spoke about just a few moments ago, that knee-jerk response to fear, and let's face it, we're being fed it, not on a daily basis, but on a moment-to-moment basis.
Yeah, of course.
And so that is what makes it difficult for many people. Now, you wrote this amazing white paper that I actually went through again on Sunday night. Tough times, tough teams, how to assure extraordinary success amongst today's extraordinary circumstances. That was really insightful. Can we talk a little bit about that and sort of help people to grasp what it is that you're putting forward?
Sure. So again, it starts, this problem that whether you inherited it or not is not the point. You got it now. Mm-hmm. This problem, to solve this problem, starts with the understanding what is the problem to solve. So first, that's what is the test you need to pass, which is not just to survive, but to succeed. And mm-hmm. then just because you announce that, we're going to succeed. Well, good for you. The real test you need to pass is how do we get others to pass the test for us? And there are three groups that will decide whether you pass this test or not. They are your manager culture, your employee culture, and your customer culture. And we're not talking about a bunch of managers, employees, and customers. We're talking about the self-protective belief systems formed when those three groups created relationships with your company. That's the power. Their power to serve you and save you is unparalleled.
Okay, let's put a pause on that for a minute because that's important. Yep. So you're saying that if we're setting it up not to survive but to succeed, there are these three groups: the managers, the customers with the third one,
employees and customers,
and the employees and customers. Okay, so we've got our three groups, and you said now we've got to pass the test. But we got to get others to pass the test, and I just want to make sure that we are all staying en route with this.
Yes.
So we're designing a test that's going to go out through those three groups. Is this how?
I'm just saying that the test you need to pass is first of all to decide that you want to succeed, not just to survive, but that's not really the problem you need to solve.
No.
The problem is how to get others to pass the test for you, because you can't just pass it by yourself. So the power of these three groups, if they want to give you that kind of protective evangelism, it doesn't matter, I mean, including during tough times, but especially during tough times. They will flank you, they will guard you, they will evangelize for you, they will course correct your strategies and goals. Yeah, they do have that power. And so it's the understanding of how those groups really work and how to get them to really work for you. And there are practical, tactical things that you can do to get them ferociously on your side. And so, that's the determinant right there.
Right. So what don't we, because we talk a lot about, certainly even on this show, we've talked a lot about culture as a whole. And you're talking about these three as individual cultures.
Yeah.
What are we not understanding, Stan? What are you trying to get across that we generally in leadership are missing?
All right. Well, first of all, culture is the most overused yet commonly least understood concept in business. Culture was actually Merriam-Webster's word of the year in 2014. And so what that means is, according to the most popular dictionary in the entire English language, culture was the most newly searched for word in the entire English language. Now, in our company, because culture is all we do, we like to say if banana had made word of the year instead, by now companies would understand what a banana is, and they would recognize it's not going to peel itself just to feed you. You actually have to know how to work the fruit, which doesn't sound right, but you know what I'm talking about. So I think
love that.
where this
We are
starts.
always a little bit politically off here. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, yes, this I am confident that in many countries this segment will already have been banned. Um, so um, so the first thing, Dove, is to add. Culture happens whenever a group of people share the same basic living circumstances, and so naturally band together to share beliefs about the rules of survival and emotional prosperity. So whether it's the jungles of Samoa or the Microsoft campus really doesn't matter. It's we are all sharing these same living circumstances. What do we know about the rules of what it takes to survive living in this jungle, in this tribe, with this chief? Once we know we're going to basically be okay, how do we get rewarded emotionally and avoid punishment? And so let's take your employee culture as an example.
Right.
It is an independent organism living right inside the enterprise with its own purpose and all the power to make or break any management plan and any manager. Its purpose is to protect itself, not the company. And even though from the company perspective, that's one and the same, do your job and you'll keep it, that would only work for your culture if it perceives a reliable through line between what happens for the company and what happens for the culture. So the key to a culture's commitment, be it customer culture or employee culture, is not saying we're the company, come to us, we gave you the job, we got the hot product. It's to go to the culture. Once the culture connects its own protection with protecting your company, then you trigger its commitment. Until then, it's just bouncing off the atmosphere. So I would say that, and very quickly.
That's a great example, because again, I think that people don't understand, as you said, I don't think people really understand what culture is, and they don't understand that it is, I'll give you an example. I worked with a CEO recently, and I said last year or so, and I said to him, who's your number one person? Who's your go-to? Who's the person who answers to you the most? And they told me, and I said, okay, what's that person's number one priority? And they named the priority, and I said, nope. And they said, oh, okay, well, maybe this. And I said, no, it's not that either. And they said, well, okay, what do you think it is? And I said, I know exactly what it is. And they said, what is it? I said, it's to keep you happy because you write the check. It's that simple. They're going to protect themselves first because that's what they have to do. And so it's exactly what you're saying, except that it's actually at the level of all the employees, all the managers, and the customers. And I think that I want to go to that part for a minute, because as leaders, I think it's very easy to disconnect from the customer. We're connected to the customer as a result, meaning I want customers so I can get money to keep the company afloat, but we're disconnected from the individuals who are, as you said, by nature, self-protective. Help us to understand that one a bit more, Stan, because I think that's something that people really need to sort of open their minds up a little bit about.
About the self-protective nature, or about
the self-protective nature of the customer in relation to the culture of the company, and our product and what it is we're doing, because like you said, we want them to evangelize for us.
Yeah. So when it comes to the customer culture, what customers would buy from you if they could buy anything is typically not what you're selling them. You're selling them basically your value, which is your quality and your innovation and your price points and your competitive features. That's your values. What they would buy is actually satisfaction of their own values, which even if it's B2B, if you're selling B2B, you're not selling to an enterprise, you're selling to human beings representing the enterprise, all the same thing. And so what they would buy if they could buy anything from you is fulfillment of their own deepest values, whether those are security-based or energy-based. And companies really don't do that. Companies go to market based on value alone. And this is when you're talking to a customer culture, this is a very dangerous business proposition. Can I illustrate this with a quick story for you?
Please, yes. Love it.
September 2003, the week that America declared war on Iraq, I was in Venice in Italy giving a keynote at some satanic soiree called the Management Conference of Europe, a few thousand people. I was at the end of that first week in September, and I'm sitting alone in the green room, and the event producers come in. It's just me in the room, and they say, listen, don't you be getting up on stage and start talking about the war. And I said, oh, my talk is about culture. And they said, this is a business event. It's not a war event. I said, okay. They said, besides, you're no war expert. I said, right. They said, do you understand? I said, I hear you. Not the same thing. So I got up on stage. I started my keynote by saying, listen, let's talk about the war. I did. And my point is listen, you could go through the canals of Venice that week, and over many balconies was hanging a European peace flag. And some balconies it was not. So assuming everybody was home, people knew about the war and they had a position one way or the other. Now you could take a position on either side, on the left or the right, but that's not the position that matters in the war, those positions. The position that matters in war is the positions in the middle, which is where the innocents live. Because the innocents are the ones that get hurt during the war. Anyway, you could go on the websites of the Fortune 100 every day that week. I know because I had somebody in our San Francisco offices sending me that every day. Now, these are the companies that take the most from the world. And there was not a single mention of the war. There was only products, pricing, promotion. Take. Now, I'm not saying you had to take a position on the left or the right. But you could have put a Gandhi quote up there. You could have said, let there be peace in our lifetime. No, nothing. And even today, the only way you'd know there was a war on is if the Gap was selling khaki. The only way you'd know there's a global depression is if Apple lowered the price on its iPhones. It just, and my message to that audience is the same as my answer to you today, Dov, is that's fine. That's fine. If you only choose to be relevant to your customer when you're trying to sell them something. But there's an awful lot going on in your customer's world, and that means you're choosing to be irrelevant to them for most of the time. And that is a very dangerous business strategy.
I thank you for that illustration. I love it. Because it's a lot of what I've been saying for years with people is with leaders is you have got to find a way to say what your customers are not saying to you. You've got to say to them so they hear their echo. And people say, well, what do you mean? And I say, I'll give you the great example. There was a guy called Donald Trump. And he got up and he spoke about the things that were not being spoken about. And as a result, he became the United States president. Now, you can agree with him, you can disagree with him, you can vote for him or not vote for him. But the key was he didn't go out and say what all the other political parties were saying, which was just the same old stuff over and over again, and people felt irrelevant. Barack Obama did it also when he went out, and it fell apart because he didn't live that truth. And the same with Donald Trump. It's not been lived. But the point was they became relevant because they spoke about the things that were not being spoken about. And I love what you just said there about becoming relevant in the person's life, the customer's life, by speaking about the things that you are not really supposed to. But that takes balls, and most companies don't have that.
You know, it doesn't. I mean, a culture, including your customer culture, a culture's awareness of you and your intention is going to be greatest when it's under pressure. And so there is an acute awareness. So you roll it back, you mentioned 2008. So roll it back to 2008 for a minute. In 2008, when the economy took a major hit and it had rolling impact, the impact was obviously on the people who were most vulnerable. So you had a lot of low-income families that had two incomes just to survive. You lose one, you lose both of those. The same today. It's devastating threat to the family, right? And so there started to be news articles in the paper about people being arrested in some of the very big Walmart-ish stores for stealing diapers and baby formula. And in the news reports, the companies were saying emphatically, we will prosecute shoplifters. But then they were also saying, well, it used to be for this pack of diapers $19.95. Now it's $15.95, as if somebody was stealing essentials for their children because they were arguing with the price point. They were stealing. It's like a grapes of wrath moment. They were stealing because they had to provide and they had no other choice. They had to compromise their values in the relationship with you. And so what these stores did is they just made a value pitch again, as opposed to, let's say they did it differently. Let's say they said, okay, you know what? We understand you're under pressure. So yes, of course, we're going to try and make this affordable for you. We also understand you're trying to figure out how to earn a living. So every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday, we're going to turn a section of our stores over to this issue and bring in experts to show you how to build a resume or do job interviews or look at entrepreneurial ventures to get income flowing back into your company. Now, if you decide to post to have a new resume and get out that way, we're going to put a section on our website with your resume. And now we're going to go to all of our suppliers, all of our vendors, which we have tremendous influence over. And we can't legally suggest this, of course, and we're not going to, but we will say, if you are hiring, in part because of the business you're getting from us, we would take it kindly if you would check this area of our website for potential applicants. And should somebody get a job, we are going to have a banner in the store. Congratulations, Joe or Mary, you're back in action. And here's a $10 gift certificate. Now, when all was said and done, because economies are cyclical and sanity will return, economies will come back, who are you going to remember as a customer? Mm-hmm. Who are you going to pay back? Mm-hmm. And so right now we have this same situation. Yes. Your customers, for the most part, are under tremendous pressure, whether you're B2B or B2C. And 99.9% of their attention is trying to figure out how to survive. If you provide them with relevance now, as opposed to just pimping value over and over again, this is giving. This is not taking, this is giving. But how is your customer culture going to respond? They're going to look for a way to pay you back. Mm-hmm. And that's to make sure that you stay around long enough so they can repay the favor. And this is when it will be noticed. And I just wrap this up, Dov, is there's a couple of things to realize about a culture. Customer culture, manager culture, employee culture. They will give you whatever you want, these cultures. You just have to give them what they want first. Right. And respecting what they want is the difference between their defiance and compliance. So the big epiphany for any listener here is it's not the responsibility of your culture to understand the business logic. It's a responsibility of your business to understand the culture's logic. And if you get that again,
that's really important.
It's not the responsibility of your business. Rather, it's not the responsibility of your culture to understand the business logic. It's a responsibility of your business to understand the culture's logic. And if you get that, you're going to be unbeatable in any market you choose to own.
So you just said something there that is incredibly important, but it comes on the heels of what you said prior to that, which is if you can give them what they need, they will give you what you need.
That's right. That's right.
But many leaders watching, listening to us will be saying, but I don't know what they really need. I mean, we've done our surveys and what they need is a cheaper diaper. We've done our surveys. What they need is a better internet connection, but that's obviously not what they really need. That's a product.
Right.
So they're saying, okay, we get it. So how do we find out what they really need?
Well, when companies, this is a great question. When companies talk to their cultures, they talk about the what, the how, and the why. Let's just take internal as an example. Sure. The same goes for your company. Here's what we got to get done. Here's how we got to get it done. Here's why we got to get it done. And when that just doesn't drive the culture into a frenzy of worshipful activity, then the company talks louder, because clearly the problem was you didn't hear us. So we will talk louder and more often about this. When that doesn't move the culture, then it's campaign time. It's contests and collateral and slogans, reach for the stars, and then all, and when that doesn't work, it's just assumed that the culture has got all the intellectual agility of a small soap dish and cannot really marvel appropriately at the elegance and sophistication of the grand plan. But when you're talking to a culture, what, how, and why doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is why not. Given the corporate logic and urgency, or the value proposition, if you're talking about your customer culture, of what your strategy is, why would your culture not give its full commitment? And if your culture is not buying what you're selling, it believes it's not safe and sane to do that. And it believes it's got empirical data to prove that to itself. So rather than continuing to hit the what, the how, and the why button, it's to hit the why not button. And a culture it's the simplest operating system in the world. Once you understand it, a culture is an information gathering organism designed to assure its own survival. What that means is its antenna is working 24/7, tracking you, seeking information. Its credibility detector is nearly infallible. Its perceptions are alarmingly accurate. Its memory is elephantine. You cannot bribe, bluff, or bully a culture into sustainably believing or doing anything. But you can recognize a culture is the most rational organism in the world. It just wants surety of its world. It wants to know what the rules of survival and emotional prosperity are in the relationship with you. It wants to trust your intentions. It wants to be able to predict your actions. It wants context for why you do what you do. It wants to feel a sense of self, that it says something about me to support you. It just wants surety. So it's no mystery what a culture wants from you. And a culture, it wants surety more than anything else, even if it doesn't like the surety. It's agnostic about that. It doesn't even matter if it doesn't like the news from you. It matters whether it can trust the news from you. And so when companies go, oh, it's just such a mystery, what do our customers want? What do our employees want? They want a reliable, predictable relationship with you so they can navigate around it and in it, because a culture exists to protect itself. And so the reliability of its environment is the key to protection. That's what that. So it all comes down to do what you say you're going to do, or shut up.
Okay, so, but that coming into the world of spin, I mean, what is it? A fair and trusted news source. A small animal uses that particular, and I watch it and think, doesn't particularly seem fair and trusted. That's not true in the news sense, but certainly in the opinion sense.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it is. The most trusted name in news was CNN. Not so sure anymore. So, it doesn't matter whether you're on left or you're on the right or wherever you are. A lot of those things are not trusted anymore. And trust is, you're talking about something here very important, which is trust. And one of the things I'm seeing more and more in my research and the work that I do is trust has become this very fragile and very polarized, really, and not much to do with any kind of rationale. The trust is, can I trust you to give me the information that I want, that supports me in my belief system and supports my bubble, which has nothing to do with reality, but my bubble. Yeah. So if you tell me hydrochloroquine is the answer to the pandemic, and I want to keep hearing that, then that's the bubble, that's the algorithm that feeds me that. If I want to say the only way to survive this is for us all to go into quarantine and wear masks, then I'm going to only read that. So a lot of it is, the trust is more about feeding the bubble. So that's where I'm getting, I want to dig a bit deeper with you, Stan.
Well, I think one of the issues is that companies are not just asking for trust. They're asking for the deepest level of trust possible. They're asking for faith.
Yes.
And faith is, I believe, but I don't know. Now, a culture doesn't even like to trust because it can make it vulnerable. To give you unfounded trust is its rarest gift because it makes it maximally vulnerable. So tactically, let's just talk tactically for a minute.
Yes.
The way you earn trust with a culture is a little bit at a time in very short bursts. What my first rule of management, by the way, seriously, is sanction the inevitable. If things suck anyway, claim it's part of your well-conceived strategic plan. So since you're not going to get the faith anyway, earn credibility with your culture by not asking for it. Say, listen, here's the new plan. And you can apply this to your customer culture. Here's the marvelous new product. But let's just, again, talk internally. If you can't sell it outside, if you can't sell it inside. So let's just start here. Here's the new plan. And I got to tell you, when we achieve this goal, oh my God, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be raining cupcakes. There'll be cartoon birds in the trees. Unicorns, they're going to be back. Everything is beautiful. Should you trust me about this? What are you, nuts? You'd be crazy to try. How do I know this is going to work? I know it's where we need to go, and I have confidence in you, but I don't know. I'm not asking you to trust me this far. I'm just asking you to trust me this far. And so in the next 60 days, here's 2 small things that will definitely happen in the name of what I'm telling you. In the next 60 days, here's 2 small things that will definitely never happen in the name of what I'm telling you. And I can tell you right now, I'm going to deliver on those things. And then I'm going to come back and negotiate for more trust. And what you've done is you put the culture in a position where it doesn't have to risk to extend that much trust to you to see what happens. Mm-hmm. And so trust is a momentum issue, Doug, because you're right. It's who do you trust now? And that leads us to another point. A culture will always trust itself more than the company. Mm-hmm. And you can't blame it for that. It's right. So the best way to talk to your culture is get your culture to talk to itself on your behalf. A message from your culture to your culture has more credibility and impact than anything you'll send from outside the culture. Yes. And the way you do that is declare emphatically and dramatically what's most important to you, and then do something provocative to prove you mean it. The culture will pick that up as a proof point. Said this, did that, turn it into a legend, which is the private database that the culture uses to verify what's the safe route. So you got to start with really saying what's important to you, and then life and business will provide the opportunities to prove that you mean it. And let the culture talk to itself on your behalf.
Can you give us an example of that? Because that was really powerful. Do something provocative that proves that this is what you mean. Is that what you said? I want to make sure.
Yeah. I can give you maybe my favorite story. It's a true story, been documented many times, although not everybody understands the backstory. Chairman Lee, who is the son of the original Chairman Lee, was the founder of Samsung, was pretty crazy about quality. I mean, quality matters was his mantra. Everybody heard it over and over and over again. Quality matters, quality matters, quality matters. Back in the early days, not the origin of Samsung, but when Samsung created its first mobile phone, Chairman Lee took several hundred of those phones and sent them out as Korean New Year gifts to his friends and VIPs and members of the media. And a cell phone back in those days was pretty significant, right? And I'm sure that he would have gotten thank you calls from those people if any of them could have actually gotten the phones to work. And when he found that that's why he wasn't getting the response he planned, he went to the factory in South Korea that at that point, they weren't the consumer giants business they are now, but it was a factory that manufactured the phones and a lot of the other consumer products like home computers and that. Mm-hmm. And so there were about 2,000 people that worked in that factory, and they were dutifully marching there in the morning. This is in around April, May, and it's cold in South Korea then. And they were they were stopped at the factory doors and directed outside to a large courtyard outside. And they rounded the corner, and there was Chairman Lee. Now, this is a Confucian culture, and Chairman Lee's like a deity to these people, like a god to them, like you are in your business to your culture.
Oh yeah.
And right. And so it was, it wasn't just like, oh my God, there's Chairman Lee. It was, oh my God, there's Chairman Lee, right? And Chairman Lee was standing there. This is a true story. Chairman Lee was standing there, and there were three guys on either side of him, leaning on sledgehammers. And there was a fire in front of Chairman Lee. They lit a fire, and the culture was thinking, the great Chairman Lee is warming our bodies as soon he is going to warm our hearts with his inspirational message. And they're all wearing their headbands, say quality matters, is the what they do. And next to Chairman Lee was a mountain, not a pile, not a hill, a mountain of personal computers, and back then fax machines and all the consumer electronic stuff that Samsung sold, and phones. It was as if somebody took the 40,000 pieces of inventory that were in the factory when they left yesterday and stacked them up in a huge mountain outside in this courtyard. Wait a minute. Those are the 40,000 pieces of inventory that were in the factory yesterday. And Chairman Lee doesn't say a word. He just says, and in front of a horrified, weeping, fainting, traumatized culture, he proceeds to have these guys with a sledgehammer destroy every single piece of equipment and throw it in the fire. And people are passing out. And he doesn't say a word. He hasn't said a word. And when this bonfire is roaring, fully, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out one of the malfunctioning phones and holds it up and says, "Fix it or I'll be back." And they lead him into the limo, and he takes off. Now, Dov, if it was your first day as a new member of Samsung, and you kind of got the welcome committee, and they said any questions, and you said I just one question. This goofy quality matters stuff, these headbands, what's that all about? What do you think they would tell you? Oh my God, let me tell you a story about something you never want to do here. And that is quality matters, quality matters, quality matters. Mess with quality and see what happens. Now, I mean, that's a negative example. There are plenty of positive cultural examples as well, but I'm not saying try that at home. If you're listening to this, do not try this at home, okay? Right? And it helps if you own the company. But even then, don't try this at home. But the key here is said emphatically and repeatedly what means the most. When that was challenged, did something significant and provocative to prove that he meant it. The culture picked that up as obvious linkage, says this, does this. It became a legend that the culture could tell and transmit from one tenured generation to the next. And that's how a legend works.
So that's profound, obviously. So let's put this in context for a moment. So there's a company who did well, pandemic hit, economic hard times. The thing they sold that did pretty good is no longer selling. Their natural sense is we got to lower the price for people to still buy it. People recognize it's valuable, but they're not buying it as much. How do they find out? Because this is by virtue of it sold before, it's said that the customer culture recognizes this is valuable, but now of course the circumstances changed. How do they get the culture to talk to them? Because this is so much of what you're talking about, and I really want to sort of keep hammering home here, is how do we get the culture, whether it's the customer culture, the employee culture, or the management culture, how do we get them to talk to us and say, this is what we really want? And how do we get them to really tell us in that way?
Okay. Well, in some ways, they already do tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm asked all the time what the definition of a great culture is. And I think people expect me to say, well, it's a happy culture. Well, yes, you do not want your culture to be actively unhappy.
Sure.
But a great culture, Dove, is a committed culture. And
Yes.
the commitment of a culture is measurable with any metric you use to manage and monitor performance. So basically, if the culture remains resilient and remains productive and loyal and evangelizes your message to customers, and customers are trying to find ways to buy from you, then the culture basically is intact. You don't need, I mean, we could give a client of ours sophisticated predictive measurements of culture's commitment, but that is the ultimate measurement of the culture's commitment, is if it's supporting the business. And what a culture wants is safety in the relationship with you. It's always wanted that. And anything you can do to provide safety for your customer culture in its own world is critical. And so that what that says is to recognize you sell two things as a company. You sell a product and you sell a process, the experience that somebody goes through to buy and use that product.
Mm-hmm.
And in the minds of a customer culture, it's the quality of the process that determines much, and now sometimes all, to determine their decision to purchase, repurchase, and recommend to others. Within the process, it lies the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And a trusted relationship, like you said, any place you can find it. And an empathetic relationship, any place you can find it. A compassionate relationship, any place you can find it. A truly supportive relationship, any place you can find it, has got heightened value. And a culture just can't be fooled. You cannot, as I said, bluff, bribe, or bully a culture into sustainably believing or doing anything. Its perceptions are so accurate. It will recognize the authenticity of this. So I would say, rather than wondering what your culture wants from you, just understand what it wants is to trust, because that's the pathway to safety. And it wants to be able to have dependable relationships, because that's a pathway to safety. And
but again, coming back to what I said, that if they have purchased, they have shown that they do trust and they do see this as a safe, quote, product, process, whatever it is for them, and then suddenly that changed, how do you get that? Like, as some, obviously outside of the economics of the situation, there's been a change in the psyche of that other culture, the customer culture. So that leader is saying, how do we get the information we need to have them still buy, or do we need to develop a new product, or what is it?
yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. I mean, listen, there are certain industries where the product has become suddenly so irrelevant,
Mm-hmm.
and or so unaffordable by
Sure.
by the most of your customer base. So that is
Yeah.
But for most companies, it's to keep that pipe open between
Yep.
us and the culture. And by the time you radically reposition your products and how you approach the market and the type of customers you approach, we'll be through this pandemic. This will not last forever. We know that it will not last forever. And so the thing to do is to heighten the quality of the relationship. And if the relationship delivers to the culture what it wants, again, they will make sure you stay around in business long enough for them to repay the favor. And they will absolutely notice it. So it's more for a company not to leap from product to product to product. It's to recognize you always had two things to sell. You always had that relationship. And that now is the conduit for the trust. And there's only so much you can get. I mean, this is commoditized. No matter what you do about it, it's commoditized. You want to enter further margin shredding commodity battles? You want to just completely revise your revenue forecast all the time? Okay. The question is, can you use this as just a delivery vehicle for everything else that you can say to a customer is come to us.
Mm-hmm.
Let us come to you, and we will. Another example is Cisco, not the IT Cisco. There's in America, there's SYSCO, the Restaurant Supply Chain Cisco.
Yep.
In 2008, when restaurants hit the rough patch because of the economy, Cisco sent teams out to their customers, back of house teams and front of house teams, And like the back house team would say, well, let's look at your plating. Let's look at your portions. Let's look at this. Let's look at how you do this. And let's see how we can increase margin for you and improve productivity. And the front of house did the same thing with the experience and the seating. And in many cases, Cisco's recommendations resulted in, you need to buy less of our products right now. But what did they create that was going to bring them back anyway at the end of this? And so if they had just said, you know what, here's a new catalog of new products for you, and here's our same old products, and we've completely destroyed the value perception because we're taking 50% off when we needed to, that would have been a very short-term survival strategy. That's not a success strategy. What they did is they weaponized, monetized the relationship, the process side, and they stood for support. And that was my message about relevant stuff, is that what your customers are obsessed about 99% of the time is not what you're selling them. So find a way to sell them so you're part of their conversation and part of their gratitude all the time. And that's the process side of your business.
And that really is what Under the Hood, your new book, is all about, right? It's about getting into that power of the employee culture of the
Yeah, it is. I have a 3-book deal with Penguin, and the first book, Bury My Heart, A Conference Room B, is all about how to maximize the commitment of your manager culture.
Right.
The second book, Under the Hood, is really the operating system of an employee culture. The third book, The Hungry and the Hunted, is not finished yet. And if they call me, I'm going to tell them I would have had it done, except I had to be on the phone with you. It's somewhere between almost completed and not started yet. It's that fine line, but yeah, we still do this work. So yes, that's what that book is about.
Right.
Yes.
Listen, Stan, I have absolutely loved our conversation, and there was so much more we could have gotten into, but I really feel like we got to some really good meat, and I'm really glad that we got to push back a little bit so people can understand, because I think that oftentimes things that are simple are complex, and meaning that they're easy for us to dismiss and go, oh yeah, I get it, but we don't really get it. And that's why I wanted to really push you into some of these things, so because I want our listeners to really get what you're saying. So as we finish here, there are 2 things I want you to do. One is, of course, I want to tell you to tell our viewers and listeners where they can find out more about you and your resources. But first, I would really like for you to share the sort of punch in the nose reality they need to get, and the practicality of what they can go away and do in the next, preferably 24 hours.
All right. Well, let's do that first. In a general sense, if I had one recommendation to give to anybody listening to this podcast, it's not specific tactical, but I'll give you some quick tactical steps, but it's the guideline to everything. Sure. And let me preface this by saying, how does a human being justify the gift of life when you think about it? You take care of those who depend on you, you give back for your success, you practice kindness and respect, you make the world, if not a better place, and not a worse one. Why should it be any different in justifying the life of a company? And to be trusted about what matters most, let this now be the defining grace of your company. And what matters most now is your humanity, your empathy and your compassion, your unbiased unity. And so it's time to stop being customer-centric and to be human-centric. So during this fierce storm, this is what will save you. I mean, you can lose a lot of things in your company. You can lose some revenue. You can even lose your mind for a little while, but you cannot lose your soul. Because if you lose your soul, then you've lost your culture, and only your culture can save you. So here's my, first of all, my number one recommendation, and it's for yourself, because it's your life that's at stake here too. It's for your family, because the health of your family outside the job depends in large part on the health of your family inside the job. It's for your employees, because it's not easy working now in environments of constant uncertainty and pressure, with regular reminders of how little control you have over your work life for someone who you only know as management. It's for your customers because people don't trust companies, they trust people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for the world because let's face it, things are very weird out there right now. And we actually have every indication that things are going to get a whole lot weirder before they get any better. Now, what is it that all the good people listening to this podcast right now can do about the conditions that affect the world at large? Not much, except to extend our own humanity to the people that we are closest to, including the people that we see every day, including our employees and our customers. And so for all of those reasons, I urge you to be human first and a manager second. You start from there, greatness awaits you. Everything will follow from there. To get a hold of us, slapcompany.com, SLAP, spelled out company, slapcompany.com, and I don't scroll this on bowling alley walls and stuff, but since it's your audience, my direct email is stan@slapcompany.com. If we can help you formally or informally, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Stan.
My pleasure.
It has been an absolute pleasure and an honor. I really appreciate all that you shared with us. As Stan said, you can find out more about him at slapcompany.com. You can find him on Twitter at StanSlap. You can find him on Instagram as well, Stan_slap. He's in all those places. Of course, we'll make sure that all those things are in the show notes as well. It has been a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
I think there's so much more to go into here for people, but I want them to know that they can get a hold of your books. Again, please just tell us the name of the books and where people can go get them.
Any place books are sold, Amazon.com, any bookstore, any independent bookseller will get you those books. And also, if you want the Tough Times, Tougher Teams white paper, we're happy to just give you that. Just reach out, get a hold of us, and we'll send that to you.
And it is excellent.
Thank you. No salesman will visit your home. Only because we can't get out. That's it.
Nobody's allowed out of the house. Otherwise, you'd be in trouble.
If we could, I'm happy to do that for you. Okay.
And remember, you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just simply look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your capability. To find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or for your organization, you can simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified meaning, or as we like to call it, finding your dragonfire, is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in all individuals and companies. We want to thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Till next time. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about the cultures that you have. And remember that it's not their responsibility to understand you. It's your responsibility to understand them. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your dragonfire to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.